Guys around the world and the great beyond, welcome back to another episode of the Schtuff podcast. Both of you still listening, we really appreciate you. Oh, just lost another one.
Thank you so much.
I'm your host, Anthony Claiborne, joined as always by the great Jonathan SB, all the way from Thailand.
Knocking stuff over, got me all elated and all nervous and stuff.
He called the vapors.
Exactly. I got the vapors, Mr. Claiborne. I got the vapors.
And we're joined today by a very special guest. I'm going to let John give the official introduction in a moment. But, Jeff, we are glad to have you hanging out with us today, man.
Absolute privilege, man. I'm so looking forward to spending time with you guys.
Oh, you ain't, I mean, you obviously have not listened to our show at all. If you haven't.
Well, no, I have, and I'm excited because this will be the first and only time. So that's what I'm thrilled about.
The first and last time I'll ever have to deal with these weirdos again.
We get that a lot.
Yeah. We're kind of burning all our bridges. We're kind of like, just bringing people along that we know and saying, let's see what happens. And, most of them are like, yep, we're no longer friends. And so
it's a free-for-all. That's why my Facebook friend list has gone down.
It's dropping. Boo, 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 boo. As we speak, they just dropping like flies. Dropping like flies. Well, Jeff, actually, man, go ahead, Anthony. I'm sorry, let me cut you off.
I was gonna say, actually, I'm 4 away from 1,000 Facebook friends.
Oh, look at you!
Wow!
Look at you! Yeah. See, that's the one thing. That's the one thing I have enjoyed. And I don't know if I enjoyed it or not, but I've gotten like a lot of Facebook friends. And you think about it, you go like, if all my Facebook friends just contributed $1 per month,
just $1 per month,
we could be funded,
totally funded.
But that's neither here nor there. They're not. I mean, that's just whatever. But I have 2,200 and some odd friends on Facebook.
It works out well when you start your second career in network marketing.
There you go. My second career. I ain't started my first career. We're talking about my second career.
He's still trying to figure out what he's going to be when he grows up.
Exactly. I'm 40 going, what am I doing? No, but
I feel you, man.
I hear you, man. I hear you, brother. We going places. We getting our celebrity on from the podcast, man.
Hey, man, I got my own clothing brand. What you talking about?
Like, wow, look at that.
Yeah, he's wearing clothes. We're happy for him.
I'll send you some swag, Jeff.
I'll take it.
So Jeff is a good friend of mine that I met a good while back. He was in here in Southeast Asia doing things, and I got to connect with him and hang out with him, and we had a great time together. I have some pictures of his face all bloodied up, and so that's always a good time when somebody walks away with blood on their face. The party was right. I'm just saying. And so Jeff is a detective in Southern California, and we're so excited to have Jeff here. He works in the area I'll let Jeff specifically tell you about, but deals a lot with crimes against children. And so we want to thank Jeff for coming on and talking with us. We're going to talk about some stuff. We're going to try to keep it as light as possible with the subject matter we're having to deal with, because it can get heavy real quick. And so we're going to try to throw at least as much levity as we can with it. And Jeff being a cop and doing the things he works in, his humor is dark as ours. So it'll be fine. It'll be good.
That's correct.
Yeah. We were talking about meth heads and other things before the recording started. So
if we ever recorded the before the show stuff,
yes,
I mean,
there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. We would get pulled.
We love our editors.
Exactly. Our fun.
And the pre-recording stuff was my own personal life. So that was, I'm glad you didn't record it.
Exactly. Your wife's like, nope. But we're thank you for you here, Jeff. Thanks for coming on and hanging out with us and spending time with us and just having a conversation with us, brother. We appreciate you, man.
Absolutely. I'm so looking forward to it. And I'm just going to throw a plug your way, John, because one of the things that I'll let everybody know is my wife and I prayed pretty extensively, and we were absolutely compelled to support you and what you're doing financially. And I'm going to tell every one of your Facebook followers or all 4 people following this podcast, give, because the work that John and Chris here are doing over there and what they do to impact so many kids' lives. I mean, literally throughout the world, because what you do is you multiply. You have people come in there, you train them, you teach them, and then you send them out. And you then have an impact in such a far reach in other countries, on other continents. So I'm going to tell you right now, anybody who's listening, any Facebook friends, give. I'm telling, I don't care if it's 5, 10, 20 bucks a month. It is one of the best ways that you can invest your money. And my wife and I, and even more importantly, my 2 daughters, we've shared with them the videos that you guys have on your website, and making sure that they know what you do. And it's funny, every month it's an absolute joy for us to be able to talk as a family and to go, this is where our money's going. And yeah, so I'm telling you, you want to experience joy, you give to SWAT Ministries and John and Chrissy Espy. I guarantee you. John didn't know I was going to do this.
John doesn't like it when we do this to him, but I'm glad
I'm telling you. My experience hanging out with John, and I tell him, a good friend of mine who still has the privilege of going back, that was one of the best periods of time in my life. And I just immediately grew connected to them. And that was a divine appointment and a divine friendship. And I get to be a part of this now. So this is great.
Man, dude.
You left him speechless, and that is impressive. Now, I keep saying, for real,
I was hoping for that.
like Jeff, we're gonna do, and maybe you need to come back when we do this. I've told John we are gonna do an episode of Guy Stuff on SWAT.
Oh
And
yeah,
he's gonna get
absolutely.
interviewed. Yeah, we're gonna have a different guest host on and just straight up interview my brother, because they definitely, are they're near and dear to our hearts. That's how John and I met. How John and I met is a really crazy story, Jeff. And I don't know if I shared this on have I shared this on one of the other podcasts, Jeff, John, about like how I even found SWAT?
I don't think so.
So check this out, Jeff.
I want to hear this.
I had been feeling just God's pulling in getting involved in some way in fighting trafficking. The state I live in, North Carolina, at the time was number 9 in the United States for sex trafficking, human trafficking, both. We're number 11 now. Whew, we've turned it around. But seriously, our SBI is working really hard to do some things. But I had been feeling convicted that we really as a family needed to be involved in some way, and like how do you do that? Like, what does that look like? Because that's a really a deep world to wade into. And I was very restless. I could not sleep one night, and I got up and I got on the computer and I got on Facebook, like so many people do, right? You wake up in the middle of the night and you go on Facebook. In fact, true story, I'm over 40. I'm actually closer to 50 than I am 40. So I wake up even now. John, what happens about 3 a.m. every night to me?
Man, every daggum night I get about 2 in the afternoon, I get a message from him. Hey, how's it going, man? I'm like, what, you up peeing? Yep, every 3 a.m. every morning this joker goes to pee like clockwork.
Like clockwork.
Need some saw palmetto tablets.
I reckon some. But
he go get his prostate checked or something, like wrung out, squeegee, whatever you do to prostate.
Prostrate, man. So but I saw we're both LU grads. We're both Liberty grads. And so Liberty, Facebook picked up the algorithm that we're both LU grads, and he was in my feed as a friend suggestion. So somehow, somewhere, we were connected through somebody. There was somebody that we both knew. And so I just clicked on it and then saw like what he did. And I was like, well, what the heck is that all about? And I clicked on that and then was like, whoa, wow, like there's somebody doing this stuff. And so we just started talking, and I think I may even message you, man, like just out of the blue, like some weird random dude, like, hey man, interested in what you guys are doing. It's kind of cool. You help people. That's awesome.
We thought it was like, it was some, homeless meth guy, that meth head had just kind of messaged us. I was like, it'll be all right.
It's like network marketing. This guy wants to sell us Amway.
Multi-level marketing. I have a multi-level marketing scheme that I'd like to get you involved
Guaranteed income.
Exactly.
Yeah, guaranteed. What could go wrong? But we just need your credit card number. But I don't know. I don't even know, from there where it went. But we just have been just very outspoken and tried to get as many people as we can to connect with what they're doing, and it's hard because as well as I do, all three of us talking here, with what you do and what John and Chrissy are doing, when you post that kind of stuff on social media and are trying to bring attention to the fight against sex trafficking and against child sexual abuse, all you get is crickets.
Mm-hmm.
But you post a picture of a puppy.
Oh man,
It's
I want to punch Sarah McLachlan in the throat every time I hear her song. Now I'm just like, yeah, every time. But that's one of the things that you guys you're awesome. Thank you for blowing smoke up my butt. I appreciate it. It's great. Anyway, but
thanks for that visual.
It's like, never mind.
We can edit that out, right?
Yeah, no, we're leaving that one in, man.
That one's probably going to stay in.
It reminds me of a case.
No.
That's what I was thinking. I won't go say it.
Have you? What case have you seen? But we wanted to talk about. It's one of the things we talk about, getting stuff out there on the interwebs. It's kind of hard, and getting information out and getting people ability to see things and engage with things is difficult. But man, brother, you started a documentary. You filmed this documentary to basically to do that, to get the conversation going, to get tools out, to, as you said before, almost a handbook of how to deal with child abuse and sexual abuse in children. And can you tell us a little bit about that documentary, that process that's happened to get that out there, and what it's called and where people can find it?
Absolutely. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share it. So the organization that we started is called Unstranger Danger. And the reason we call it Unstranger Danger is because the reality is, and some people may know it, I think it's getting some more traction now, but statistically, 90% or more of all kids who've been offended, been sexually abused, were abused by somebody they know, trust, or love. And so this idea of stranger danger, of this frightening looking boogeyman in a trench coat that goes out and snags kids up from the street, it is every parent's worst nightmare. There's no question about it. But the reality is it's almost statistically insignificant. What happens when these kids are kidnapped and assaulted and in some cases killed is absolutely horrific, and that's what makes the news. But I've worked probably well over 1,000 cases now involving kids, and I can think of 5 where the kids were abused by somebody they did not know, that was a complete stranger. All the rest of them were offended by, it was either mom's boyfriend, or it was grandpa, it was uncle. These are people, sometimes of course teachers or a pastor. And so I had this idea to try and put some information out that would help parents. There's that book, What to Expect When You're Expecting, about childbirth. And so the thought was, could we put something out there that would help parents understand when they're in the midst of it? And so I had this idea of developing what I called the 4 core pillars of child abuse response. And the first pillar is prevention, because the goal is absolutely to prevent it. But there's close to 8 billion people on the planet, and evil exists. So we're never going to eradicate this. So
my first question, sorry to interrupt you there.
Yeah.
Like, how do you, like, with that, how do you prevent? What would be a way to prevent it? Like you said, it's my grandpa, it's uncle, it's cousin, it's all this stuff. Like, we're gonna just bubble wrap my kid up, or like this like, anybody that looks at my kid, just whack them. Like, what's some of the ways that, in the, maybe you cover that in the documentary, of protecting, of keeping our kids safe, and on the prevention side, and then we can get into the okay, well that's failed and for whatever reason, and then going in the other side of it. But what's some of the ways that we can, as parents, like, do some kind of prevention work with that?
It's such a good question, and I think it's so important to have the discussion, because I'll just tell you candidly, because prevention is hard, because prevention means that you have to recognize that there is a possibility. It may be improbable, but it's possible that someone close to you in your family is capable of sexually abusing your child. And who wants to think about that? who wants to think that my new husband, or actually, or my kid's stepdad, or my father, their grandfather or uncle, nobody wants to deal with that. And yet those are the vast majority of the people that offend against kids, because they have two things: they have access and they have opportunity.
Yeah.
And so when these offenders have access and opportunity, and they've had the opportunity to groom, and we can get into that as well, but to essentially endear themselves to either family, either just merely by position, by title because they're a family member, or through building a relationship, they've been able to groom the adults to make the adults believe that they are trusted, that they have the child's best interest in mind. So what I'm doing is I'm laying out for you the question, like, how do you do that? And so one of the ways, for me, and I've thought about this, is I think that clearly you have to have age appropriate conversations with your kids. And again, this is not, I don't want to go down the road of saying this is not research based, but I'm sitting here thinking, what can we do to empower the kids? So one of the things I'd thought about doing, I talked to my wife about this, is I said, how great would it be to be able to, you pull in all these family members and you make it clear, because one of the things that happens is these trusted people will encourage these kids to keep a secret, or they'll tell them, this is how we show our love. This is totally normal and natural. And a child of tender age isn't going to be able to, number one, question authority or understand the difference. So one of the things I thought about, but I don't know too many families who want to do this, is you bring all the family together and you say, hey, these are my kids. This is your uncle, your dad, your brother, your cousin, your so-and-so. And one of the things that we want to make sure that everybody understands here is that you have incredible value and worth, and people are to protect you. And there are ways in which that we can show affection and love to one another. And then there are ways that we don't. And we are all here to tell you that there are things about you that are private and that nobody is ever able to touch. And every one of these people is in agreement, and every one of these people will defend your right to be protected. And so instead of just now putting the burden on the kid, now you've incorporated the whole family. So that child knows that everyone is in agreement with this.
That's one of the things we do with our kids, is like, I mean, it may sound funny or whatever, but we do it. It's like, look, if you're out somewhere and whether it's a school or wherever, and one of your brothers and sisters, they going off somewhere, with a stranger, or they going off somebody that's private, kind of thing like that. No, that ain't happening. Like, you need to go and protect your brother and sister. And if somebody touches your brother and sister, you throat punch that joker as hard and as fast as you can. And so that's one of the things that you tell even the little ones, like, look, anybody touches you, you bite them, you scratch them, whatever. They're not allowed to touch you in that way. And so, and our kids are, we have some younger kids, probably got some older kids. I always tell the older ones, you better be, somebody tries to touch you, you better throat punch them jokers, like quick, fast, in a hurry.
Yes. And that's what go ahead.
I was just gonna say, when ours was small, they're not small now, but when they were smaller, we we didn't at that time realize the danger, I guess. Not that anybody in our family was a danger, but we didn't realize the statistics. We assumed always it was going to be that outside person. So we taught them how to kick low and kick hard and kick often. And we told them, like, if somebody ever tries to snatch you, you start kicking and you start yelling, not my mommy, not my daddy, not my mommy, not my daddy. But you hit on the reality that it's so often people that we know in these situations. And one of the things, and I wrote it down, that's jumped out to me from the documentary, was you said you talk about your body and boundaries in an appropriate way. And I thought that was so important. And you hit on it right then, your body and boundaries. It's your body. And even what I got out of that was like proper terms for the body. I think sometimes
that's correct.
We see these little pet names that parents use, and I'm not trying to bag on anybody, don't misunderstand me, but we actually do our kids a disservice by not just being straight and legit and using biologically correct terms. I'm not talking about coarse terms, but biologically correct terms for
Is
what
junk
things
like
are.
is junk a biological term? Like nobody touching
So
your junk.
so junk would
In
be a
your
pet
case,
term.
John,
Okay,
100%. It ain't nothing but junk.
For a college student, that would be appropriate.
Okay, guys.
Yes.
Okay. So so tell my 7-year-old like
This
don't.
is why we have the professionals on. We are not the professionals.
Exactly. We're not even clear. We're close to it. Anyway,
But you're
my
hitting
bad.
the nail
My
on
bad.
the head. You're hitting the nail on the head, Anthony. And it's funny. These are things that nobody, here's the challenge with this. And it's like trafficking as well. Nobody wants to sit down and really think long and hard about this and talk about it because this is as uncomfortable as it gets. And the last thing any parent ever wants to think about is the fact that their child could be sexually abused by somebody in their circle. And so oftentimes, and I'm not faulting anybody for this, but oftentimes the thought is, well, it'll probably never happen to me, and this is really uncomfortable, so I'm just not going to address it. And that's a challenge. And also to your point, that's what makes this thing so much more insidious and so much more complex, because it's easy to talk about beating down the stranger.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to
talk about beating down Uncle Joe. You beat down Uncle Joe.
Or when Uncle Joe says, if you tell anybody about this, you and I are going to go to jail. So that's why, again, I use the word, it's insidious, and it's because these people know exactly what to do to accomplish their goal, and at the same time put the onus and the burden on a child to make that child think that what they did was wrong, and that Uncle Joe loves me, and I don't want to get Uncle Joe in trouble. For all the Uncle Joes out there, I'm sorry, I'll use Uncle Jeff. But that's the difficult thing is that's why dealing with the stranger is easy. We can have conversations all day long about stranger danger, but man, when it's in your home, how do you have that conversation again when the person sleeps in a room next to you? And that is why. And so again, I think having family and having a collective understanding, as uncomfortable and as weird as that might be, it empowers that child, and it tells the child, well, no, if Uncle Joe or Uncle Jeff tries to touch me, we just had this conversation and everybody knows that that's not allowed. Another tool of prevention is engagement, and put your phone down, get off social media, see what your children are doing. Monitor what's being.
That should be a whole episode right there, man. I can't tell you how many times. I'm sorry, Jeff. I will go out to eat, and I look around the restaurant, and everybody's like this, the whole family.
Yeah.
Oh man, sorry, Jeff. Go ahead, bro.
No.
Well, that you trying to talk. You touched on something, Jeff, and it you touched it, and it was a side video you did. I kind of telling your story. About how, and you can get in that more if you want to, about how you were groomed a little bit by somebody that was near to your family that worked his way in and groomed you. And that was the thing that for me was shocking. And your story kind of explains a little more, but even parents that don't have the drug addictions that your mom that had to deal with and was kind of, blinded by that and allowed that to happen with the grooming process. But like how the grooming process happens with people around you that you never suspect. Oh, this is, this Papa just wants to spend time with the grandkid, or Uncle Joe wants to, go take, Susie out for ice cream. It's like this grooming process that maybe completely blind to. So how could we see some of those things as a parent that's trying to engage, that's trying to get off the phone, that's not that's trying to take care of our kids? What's some ways of doing that with to see that grooming process possibly happen, maybe even through electronics?
It's a really good question. And in fact, given this whole pandemic and the fact that kids have been locked inside, I wrote an op-ed for the San Diego Union Tribune recently addressing some signs to kind of look for, because the one thing we don't want to do is we don't want to have this supersede quality of life and family. We don't want to sit there and say, if grandpa wants to hold granddaughter in his lap and love on her, We can't default to there's a salacious or a malicious intent there. I don't want anybody to default to that. But there's some things that you can see. If a child becomes resistant to wanting to be around that person, if a child expresses fear, or maybe grandpa or mom's boyfriend watches and cares for that child, but that child starts to demonstrate behavior, either they're showing some level of behavioral issues, maybe they're defiant, or they become angry quick, or they're showing fear. Those are really key signs that you need to look into at that point in time. And usually you can see those transitions. Everything seems to be fine. The child has no problem being at home with that person. And then all of a sudden, now they don't want to be home. They get upset when you leave. Those are some things that I think we're going to see as school starts again in the fall, hopefully, because that's when our reports really pick up, because you've had time off from school, you've had time away from the people that you can disclose to. And so now they come back and they're in a safe place where they can finally tell somebody what happened. So that's where the engagement is necessary, where you can sit down and have conversations with your child, asking how, what they did today. If they start to demonstrate behavior where they become isolated, their eating changes. If you have younger children and maybe you've had some success in potty training and now they're regressing. Those events taken alone shouldn't necessarily cause you alarm, but when you start to see clusters, when you start to see some changes in behavior where you notice it, that's where you need to really step in and find out what's going on. And we can go down the road however you want with respect to how to inquire of those kids, because talking to the kids about that is really important, and doing it the right way is also really and critically important. But that is where that parental engagement comes in. And if you're sitting here and you're posting on Instagram and doing what you're doing all day long, and you are a disengaged person, and I think you guys know this. The fact of the matter is, in this day and age, in Western culture specifically, I would say it's probably a global issue now. People are so driven by their devices, and they're so driven by media that they start to lose everything else around them. And that happens. I think, Anthony, you're talking about being in a restaurant. It happens at home too. Yeah. I have to catch my wife and I both. Sometimes we'll be sitting on the couch watching a movie, and we've seen it before with the kids. And next thing you know, you get a notification. We're both looking at it, and she and I both at the time, she's like, "Look what we're doing." We're like, "Gosh, dang it!" So
it's the Illuminati, man.
Everybody,
the Illuminati is trying to get
Illuminati reveal.
Exactly, trying to pull us in the matrix,
so
man.
Telling you, man, and they're doing a heck of a job. And so with respect to prevention, having age appropriate conversation with your kids. Anthony, you touched on it, talking to kids about their specific body parts, parental engagement, monitoring your child's behavior, seeing if there's any transitions or changes. Also, if one of the key things that would be shocking to most parents is if you see a child acting out sexually that's completely inappropriate, or having conversations. I had a case one time where a girl, she was 12 years old at the time, and she had made some comments at a family gathering that no 12-year-old should make while she was engaged in physical, which appeared to be non-significant contact with a family member. But the comment that she made would, if I polled 100 people, all hundreds should say, "That's unbelievably inappropriate. Where did you learn that from? And what prompted you to say that? Like, how would you even know to use that term?" So that's a clue. That's key. And at no point in time in that particular case, no parents inquired. Instead, she got punished for using the language that she did. And in fact, she'd been being abused by a family member for years. And that's why she said the thing that she said that no 12-year-old should say. So those are all tells. Those are all signs that the second you see it, you got to raise the red flag and say, something's wrong here, and I need to figure out what's going on.
Well, as I watched the documentary and listened to the stories from the young ladies, as a father of a daughter, I have a 17-year-old daughter, and protective, maybe sometimes I struggle with being overprotective even, I guess. I don't know. I think dads of daughters, we that's our constant struggle. But
Yep.
you know, gosh, my heart just broke. I just the only time recently I have felt that sick is when I watched Craig Sawyer's documentary.
Hmm.
You know, it
Yeah.
just absolutely gave me that sick feeling in my stomach. And we worked really hard with our kids, and I think we were in tune to it a little bit better, probably because of being in teachers youth ministry and all that stuff. But what if you do everything quote unquote right and it still happens? You know, it still happens. Speak to that a moment, because we know that does happen. And so I don't know, maybe in the audience listening, somebody might have experienced that. They did everything, they checked all the boxes, did it exactly like the playbook said, but then it still happened.
So that is the reason why we call it unstranger danger, a more comprehensive response to child sexual abuse beyond prevention alone, because there are a lot of resources that address prevention. But again, I get brought in when prevention either failed or when it was never presented as a viable option. So that is what I wanted to address. And so I appreciate the question. So I mentioned that I call them 4 core pillars, prevention being absolutely critical, number 1, but the other 3 are implemented when, like you said, it failed, when you might have done everything right and your child was still a victim. So then we have the other 3 pillars, which is investigation, prosecution, and restoration. And I'm going to start by just saying, because I want there to be hope for anybody who's listening, if your child or a child that you love or care about has been the victim of sexual abuse, that is not the end. That not only is restoration possible, but restoration is highly likely because there are so many resources. We have what's called an MDT approach, a multidisciplinary team approach. So you have social workers, forensic interviewers, district attorneys, victim advocates. There's a whole host of support that will surround a child, and also adults who didn't disclose when they were children, and now they are for the first time, and they're walking through this process.
Yeah.
So that's important to know too. So when it all failed, that's what I wanted to address in the documentary, was the next steps. What do I do now? And so that's where the investigation is absolutely critical. One of the things I will tell a parent, or anybody who has had a child tell them that they've been offended, is the first thing that you want to do is just let them know how brave and courageous they are in coming forward and giving them a level of comfort, making sure that they know that they're not in trouble in any way, shape, or form, no matter what it is they tell you. Complicity is something that kids often have to work through, because they might have been complicit in the act because they didn't know that what they were doing was wrong. But when they're threatened by somebody saying, hey, if you tell, you're going to get in trouble, that's why it's important to make sure that you address that head on and let the child know how brave they are and that they're safe and that you are there to protect them. The other thing that we say is you don't want to ask leading questions. You don't want to ask suggestive questions. There's this idea of suggestibility in a lot of the research about child sexual abuse. And so any parent, your natural inclination is going to be, I got to find out what happened. I got to know all the details. And you can very easily grow impassioned about wanting to know what's going on, because then at that point in your mind, you want to go out and address that issue. That's natural. And what's not natural is to say, depart from your initial inclination and don't do that. Open-ended questions are key. Asking the child something like, can you tell me what happened? If you're comfortable, tell me what happened, and let them just tell you. You don't want to ask a bunch of follow-up specific questions, because what'll happen after that is whoever that person is that's been told, the first thing they need to do is call your local law enforcement. You need to call the police department and let them know that a child just told you that they've been sexually abused. Because from that moment, we have to make an assessment. Number one, is the abuser still in the home, and is that child likely to go back there later in the day if they've told it from school or something like that.
Wow.
If that's the case, that's when we get the phone call and all hands on deck. It's an all skate. We bring the whole unit out, and we have to develop some very strategic investigative processes to try and glean that evidence, and try and glean information. I'll touch on the evidence here in a moment. Because oftentimes there's a delay. Kids, all research, even people that maybe disagree with how kids are abused, there's a collective response in the research that says that most kids delay in telling. And there's a wide variety of reasons for that. But that's why we need to find out, when did this last happen? Because if it happened yesterday, and if the acts would leave physical evidence behind, we want to be able to collect that. And there is a medical way in which we can do that. The other thing is we want to have the child interviewed. And across the country, there are forensic interviewers. And sometimes people can connotate forensic with, like, CSI kind of thing. All a forensic interview is a controlled interview that's often audio and videotaped, that allows the child, again, in a very safe environment, to tell the interviewer what happened. But that interviewer is using a specific set of strategic questions, and they're using a research-based template on how to be able to speak to a child so that that information at a later date will be acceptable in court. And that statement that the child makes is and I hope I'm not getting in the weeds here on you guys. But from the investigative side, I want to make sure that everybody understands this is kind of the step-by-step process that you take the moment a child tells you. You don't go and confront the suspect, because we don't want the suspect to know that the child told.
Right.
You don't say, "Oh, we called the police." You just don't want to give them anything. Yeah. Don't give them anything. Immediately call the police and let us and all those amazing professionals across the country kind of figure out what is the next step in that process.
And that kind of leads into a question I had for you too, is and what gave you, like, what is your role that gave you the authority or the insight or the inspiration to do this film? What's some of the task force you're involved with, so people can know if they're, like, where you're coming from? What's some of the task force? What's some of the agencies that you work with on a large scale that gives you the authority to say, this is the movie I'm making, or the documentary I'm making, for these reasons? Like, what's some of the background credentials that you have and people that you work with?
Yeah, and I'll in a moment I'll tell you exactly kind of what the impetus was that gave me this idea to create this documentary, because it didn't start out with how it ended. And I really do believe that there was some divine guidance in that process. So I've been with a police department in Southern California, the northern end of San Diego County, for a little over 16 years. And for about 8.5 years, I've been assigned to our Family Protection and Child Exploitation Unit. And so we handle child physical abuse, child sexual abuse, online child enticement. We also do other family-related crimes like we investigate domestic violence, stalking, elder abuse. So it runs the gamut, but the vast majority of our cases are child sexual abuse cases, the absolute vast majority. And while that's my primary job, I also have a couple collateral jobs. So I'm part of what's called ICAC, which is the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. Every major city in the United States has that task force. And that task force responds to online threats, online child exploitation, child pornography. And the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children will send out cyber tips that various applications or electronic service providers will send and say, hey, like Facebook will say, hey, somebody shared this video on Facebook. And then they'll say it has an IP address that comes back to San Diego County. So then, and if that IP address comes back specifically to the city in which I work, the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force will send that to me, and then we'll investigate that and follow that up as well. So that's my role with the online work. And then I'm also a member of the FBI's Child Exploitation Task Force. And that task force really does work hand in hand with with the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. And with that, I was required to be cross-sworn as a Special Deputy U.S. Marshal so that we can work cases that are outside the state of California. We have offenders that they're posing as children and maybe in New York, and they're trying to speak to and groom and solicit pictures from children in California. And so we get to work very closely with our federal task force partners in that respect. So
you hit on something right there, Jeff, that I wrote down a minute ago when you were talking. Do you find, and what you just said just kind of brought this to me again, do you find that perpetrators have almost figured out how to stay one step ahead of law enforcement? And in a sense, they've created, if you will, they figured out how to game the system, if you will, and stay a step ahead to keep abusing their victims.
certainly, we see that online. There's no question that these deviant offenders who are online that are either peddling in child pornography, trying to solicit children to send them pictures, or just to be able to have sexually deviant conversations with kids because that's their thing. Those guys, and this is not something that is not widely known. In fact, it is widely known. They're utilizing VPNs, virtual private networks. So they're showing that their IP is in Canada, but really they're in New Mexico, and they're masking their IPs. And so they're doing things in such a way that it is really challenging from a local investigative standpoint. If something is significantly egregious and it becomes a major case that has national or international implications, then that's the benefit of being able to tap into our federal task force partners, because there really are some amazing men and women that have skill sets and computer literacy technology. I mean, they're unbelievable human beings, and they'll chase down anyone. When it comes to the hands-on offenders, that again often is known by the child, they are coming up with different ways in which to try and mask the behavior. But again, one of the ways in which they try and do that more than anything else is through the control of the child. And they control them in one of two ways: either threatening the child in a more sinister way with saying that that child could be in trouble, or that child could go to jail, or sometimes they'll threaten with harm, with either physical harm to the child or physical harm to someone the child loves. We have had cases where the child was told, if you say anything, I'm going to kill your parents. Yeah. I mean, and literally children are not going to speak because they don't know any better. But then they also manipulate in other ways by letting the child know that they could be in trouble. They being the offender, meaning, if you tell anybody, I'll never be able to be around the family again, and I will go to jail for a long time. So again, this manipulation. And these are tools that we have seen over and over and over again. And that is why when a child does come forward to tell, it is a significant event, because they have had to overcome all of those issues: the shame, the embarrassment, the guilt, the fear, the worry that they're going to be the one responsible for putting, Uncle Joe in jail. And so, but nevertheless, these offenders still use these tools to keep that child quiet, while also, in fact, I think Rosie says it in the documentary. She says, he was trying to fool everyone, talking about her stepdad. Yeah. And he had everybody fooled because he's one way with her, but when everyone else is around, it's Jekyll and Hyde. He puts on a different mask.
Well, abusers in general tend to be very charming and very able to work a room. They tend to be, at least in what I've seen, their Jekyll and Hyde is spot on. There's this dichotomy of what is seen in public versus what is seen in private. All of us struggle with what we allow people to see in public and in private, but they are at another level.
You're right.
So,
and they're at that other level because they're so desperate to get to that final place. That finish line is the sexual contact and the satisfaction that they achieve from that. I've had people ask me all the time, do we think that, again, asking my opinion, there's plenty of other people with lots of little letters at the end of their name that might have some different opinions. But the question that I get asked more than anything is, can these people be fixed? Can they be rehabilitated? And I often have said, I don't believe that they can. I believe that they can be managed. And because if they have a proclivity that it's like people who have fetishes. Like it's funny, in our work we see people who have really weird fetishes. We have guys who, they're addicted to feet for whatever reason. And
that's Anthony.
and
Anthony likes
God,
feet, man. He's always trying to send me pictures of feet. So
I was gonna
it's weird.
say, God help anybody
Weird.
who likes John's feet.
I'm telling you, man. Anthony always asking pictures of my feet. I'm just
I
wondering.
thought that was just our secret, John.
No, man, we coming clean on this thing, man. We coming clean. We ain't in the shadows no more.
I wrestled with you, John. I know you've got talons down there. That's just a
talons.
That's another self-defense tool.
It's good for gripping. It's good for gripping. They're good.
But those are the kind of things. So these people, so people who have these weird fetishes that you look at, you're like, okay, for whatever reason, somebody likes shoulders or whatever. But these people, they are driven, and their whole world is around the sexual excitement they get from kids. And that's why they're viewing copious amounts of child pornography and so on. So
I'm going to ask you what I know every guy out there is thinking, and what I bet John's thinking, and what I'm thinking. How in Sam Hill do people get to this point? Like, how, you know what I'm saying? Like, how does somebody become that person? Because I can't fathom it. So how does a person become that?
And this is nothing you probably can touch on this too, Jeff. And as you're explaining that, I mean, I think there's do you see, is there a level of diminishing returns where it takes something weirder and weirder and weirder and stranger and stranger and stranger to get them sexually aroused? Or is this something that is completely just off? Their wiring's off, and this is the thing the only thing that gets them going. I don't know if it ties in what Anthony's saying, but if you could answer both of those together.
Yeah, they do tie into one another, and there is a lot of research, and there's a lot of real incredible researchers out there. There's a guy named Daryl Turner, psychologist, Graham Hill, Dr. Graham Hill. I've studied under several of these guys, and when I mean study, I've gone to various conferences. I've gone to and had coursework under these researchers, and they sit down and they talk with people who've been convicted of child sexual abuse, or maybe they've been convicted of possession of child pornography. And those are the experts. I will never claim to be an expert in understanding how they get to those places, but I have had the privilege of sitting down and having conversations with the vast majority of these guys who I've arrested over time, or I've investigated their cases. And there are some that are a little bit more open than others, but one of the things that the research shows, and one of the things that we've encountered anecdotally in our own case investigations, is a lot of these guys, some of the research shows that they discovered that they have an interest or a sexual interest in children before the age of 18. So, and unless you address that early and start to work on getting them significant therapeutic psychological treatment, and again, it's likely they're not going to go disclose to anybody and tell anybody, oh, this is what I'm interested in. They're doing some things in secret. They're looking at pornography. That pornography they start to look at different genres of pornography where it might depict adults who look like children. There's a whole realm of pornography when it comes to that. So they start to condition their own minds so that's what they're consuming. And not only are they consuming it, but their whole world revolves around consuming it. Dr. Graham Hill talks a lot about the fact that these guys, it's like it becomes all that they live for. It's why they're up till 2, 3, 4 in the morning, because they're just online looking at these vile images and videos. And so they get themselves to the point where at some point it no longer is satisfying them. And I think that is why then it moves on to, well, seeing this. Now I want to experience it. I want to live an experiential part of this. And then that is where they have access and opportunity. Some of these guys will absolutely go out and they will go out and target a child that is a total stranger to them. But the vast majority of these people have some, yeah.
You Paul.
So a lot of these guys, they will condition themselves with the content that they're looking at, and at some point in time have the they'll have the access, but then they want to have an opportunity, and that has to be done, of course, away from people. So when it comes to these types of offenders, the conditioning of their minds through the viewing of this content will ultimately, and it doesn't happen for everyone, but for a good portion of them. And there was a study that was done several years ago where they essentially there were polygraphs done of sex offenders who were in jail who had been maybe they were arrested for child pornography, and they were polygraphed about whether or not they also were hands-on offenders. And there was the study essentially, the result of that study essentially said that the vast majority of those guys had also offended. So there was a correlation between the two. So I'm not saying that correlation equals causation, but what I am saying is that if you are watching that content enough and you're deviant enough to where that satisfies you sexually, the likelihood of you attempting to experience that and have an experiential encounter to test it or to find out if it will satisfy you as sexually as watching the videos is likely. So, but again, there are experts that really delve into that, and I would defer to a lot of those experts. But I'm grateful that I've had opportunities to sit underneath them and to glean a lot of understanding, because it helps me when I interview these guys following arrests.
That's heavy, man. I mean, there's just no other way to say it. It's just heavy.
Yeah.
It's a heavy topic. This is not all fun and games, kind of day on the Guy Stuff podcast. But guys, as defenders, as fathers, as husbands, and being in positions too of authority, and as a youth pastor and teacher, for example, and coach, I never allow myself to be alone, even in a room with a student, male or female, because I didn't even want to give the appearance of something shady.
Well,
and go ahead, John.
No, this is a question that come up. Like you mentioned it, like you said, male and female, and like even with a male, like and one of your
well, it started like back in the day as female, man. Like, we would never allow ourselves to be alone with a female.
Yeah.
But then we realized we can't be alone with anybody.
Well, there's a thing you said in the documentary talking about, like, there was no males available, or like you had no males to actually put in the documentary. Could you go into that a little bit? Like, of course males are getting sexualized or getting abused. Is it primarily male to male, or is there any? Have you seen cases of female to male, and are they even bringing that up, or do you want to talk about it or not?
No, it's a very good question. Yeah. So when I did my little 7-minute Jeff story, I wanted, because it was a question that I had with people who actually watched the documentary. They said, one of the things that sticks out is that all the kids, these are kids whose cases I worked and the cases were adjudicated. They were girls, and the vast majority of cases I had were girls. The kids whose cases were boys, I did have a handful of them, but they were very, very young boys at the time. There were instances where it was boy on boy, and sometimes the kids were the same age. There were instances where one boy was preteen and the other one was a teenager. And but again, just given their age and given where they were, certainly I would not want to put a young child. I would not want to ask a young child if they would want to share their story. So when we originally filmed it, we ended it with essentially me moving from the interviewer chair to the interviewee chair, and I was going to be the male representative to talk about child sexual abuse from the male perspective. Because the reality is the documentary is representative of the statistics. The vast majority of boys, not only do they delay in telling, the vast majority of them just don't tell at all. And all the stigmas that are associated with that you can possibly imagine, boys that thinking that, again, there's shame, guilt, am I gay, all those kinds of things. Because the fact of the matter is that if you are stimulated by someone as a young man, there's a natural processes that work. There's a physiological response. And so that can completely jack your mind. And the last thing you want to do is address those things.
Yeah. Well, even that sense of like, we kind of joke about it sometimes going, in school, like, you want the teacher to the hot teacher to be the, hey, let's go out and, have some fun together, those kind of things.
Someone listened to Van Halen growing up.
Exactly. Half a teacher.
There you go. Yeah.
But I mean, like, it's
I never had any of them teachers, man.
Man, there was a few of them. I don't want to say the name because they may be listening to the podcast, but I'm not saying the name. But there was a few of them that were like.
I'm just saying I wasn't lucky enough to have any hot teachers growing up.
I mean, I had a couple. They were anyway. That's beside the point. The point I'm trying to say is that even that conversation we're having is like, man, I wish I had some hot teachers. Would that? I mean, because that's abuse. That's still abuse in the sense of there's a older female that's necessarily preying on a younger male, but it's almost socially accepted. Like we go like, hey, fist bump the guy, to be like, hey, you scored a teacher. How is that dealt with? I mean, did you deal with that in the documentary in that sense, or have you dealt with that in your own personal experience? What does that look like in reality when abuse situations happen with a female to a male?
So that's it's a valid point, because again, culturally, and you've seen teachers that were arrested they get a ton of news. They all seem to happen out of Florida for some reason. I don't know what's going on in Florida, but a good portion of it seems to get out of Florida. Most of our case law comes out of Florida too. So, but you see, what do they look like? They appear to be highly attractive, fit, shapely. And so that has always been kind of a joke, in the sense that what sixth grader, seventh grader, eighth grader is going to be a quote unquote victim.
Yeah.
And we have to change our mindset about that, because the fact of the matter is they're using that boy for sex. They're using that boy for some sexual gratification. I've had one case in 8.5 years where it was an adult woman had lured, manipulated a high school boy. And in fact, it kind of, the case, when it went public, kind of went all over the news, all over the place, because again, it's a rare instance. And so the reason that she had this connection with this boy is because the boy was dating her daughter. And so the mother ends up going to pick up the boy, engaging in sexual contact with him. And she was just a dark, dark person. And while peer groups may think, again, like you said, the Van Halen song, Hot for Teacher, it's kind of celebrated in culture. And boys can't be victims. But the fact of the matter is, that kid in particular, he was a bit messed up after that for a while. Because if you think about it, once again, they're kids, whether male or female, their brains aren't fully developed yet.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why you shouldn't allow 16-year-olds to vote.
Dudes' brains don't even start like what is it, like 24 or something, before a guy's brain is fully maturely developed.
Yeah, the decision-making area in the brain. Absolutely. And so they might think but again, culture is grooming our boys too. You can't turn on a flipping television without seeing sex being just thrust down your face, billboards. We have created a hypersexualized culture. And it's my belief and opinion that Hollywood is the number one groomer of children. Period.
Mm-hmm.
The end.
Yeah. Amen.
And you can look at that through some new Disney movies that are coming out, and what we're trying to inculcate kids in thinking.
You hit on something right there, Jeff, that always, and I'm not trying to throw shade on Disney, but I call a spade a spade. Okay. When my daughter was coming up, I would, I wanted to be involved. So I would watch what was going on. And like I remember specifically, like for example, there was this video that came out for a Selena Gomez song when Selena was still very young, and they showed it on Disney. And in this video, and I'm not going to name the name of the song or anything like that, but this video was her as a young woman singing in this club for all these older men. Son, as a dad of a dog, I
Mhm.
was ticked because it was not lost on me what was happening, and
Yeah.
and they were essentially showing millions of young women this is acceptable for you to
Yeah.
be. And it was a very sexualized. It actually showed her as a young woman with a much older man. I mean, I was like, I it just makes me mad to even think about. And I've talked about that many times. We have sexualized our children. People talk about stuff. I taught in public schools for a while, and people talk about, they debate, like whether or not we should, allow children to be exposed to, you know, transgender people, and it's, we should be talking about sex with these kids at school at that age period. Transgender,
Exactly.
heterosexual, like giraffe. I don't care. We should be protecting the innocence of our children instead of sacrificing them on this altar of over sexualization that has just become so rampant in our culture. Sorry, I
I
got on my
would.
soapbox for a minute, and I'm
No,
sorry. I climbed right up
I,
on it.
I love letting you go. I'm telling you, I couldn't agree more because and again, I have friends from all walks of life, um, different sexual orientations, and one of the people I respect and absolutely love more than anything else has a different sexual orientation, and it's totally. But you know what? They don't. It's not their identity, and it's not just thrust upon everyone in the
And
same
Jeff,
way that.
you have a lot of
Go
you
ahead.
have a lot of trans friends around you. You hang out with a lot of trans
He
people.
lives in San Diego.
So I mean,
No,
you
just
hang
kidding.
out. I mean, that's your demographic you go clubbing
E-
with.
e- folks that are listening, what I said at the very start of this podcast, I'm now retracting. Um, keep your money. Uh,
Anyway,
really,
sorry,
John?
sorry. You
Uh,
go, man. My bad. You go, man. I'm just
Well,
saying you out clubbing
no.
with the trans. I'm just saying you get
Hey, what did Paul say? You got to be all things to all people,
it's
brother. So
do a little
I
bumper
had to get out
X,
there, man.
do a little bumper X, and go out the club with him, man.
Yeah, don't knock my
Lord.
platforms.
On that note,
We'll pause
as
this one out. We'll try to cut this one out.
yeah, as we as we kind of start to wrap, land the plane, I do want to ask you, how important, at least, have you seen any importance that faith plays in the lives of these people, these young people, as they are walking through restoration? I want to look at that restoration piece
Mm.
with you, if we can, for a moment.
The restoration piece is, to me, I think that is the linchpin. I mean, that to me is so important because if you don't have the hope that you can recover from this, then what's the point of moving forward? What's the point of going on other than just to think that you are forever tagged as a victim? My wife and I often dialogue about the survivor status, and I keep thinking I want a different term to use I would never describe myself as a survivor, because I feel like that's almost a little bit passive. I often like to use the term fighter, but people don't totally understand, because you got to fight through that stuff. You got to fight through it mentally, emotionally. Um, but then, we've talked about how to transition people from being somebody who's a survivor to a thriver. So you're no longer defined by this title that you have from something in the past, but you're a thriver. You're somebody who can thrive in life despite whatever adversity you faced. And what is, I think, of such critical importance is the fact that, and I might have said this before we actually started going live on the podcast, but it is the most important piece. So many of these cases, because there's a delay in disclosure, because kids wait to tell until they're older, there's no evidence. It's a he said, she said, and the challenge of trying to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt in court is very difficult. So there is a likelihood, if we don't have an immediate response, there is a likelihood that you may never get justice in a courtroom. The offender may never get arrested. But what is so important to know is that your restoration is not dependent upon the arrest or conviction of a suspect. Your restoration is mutually exclusive, and you can have full restoration. I mean, I never told anybody about my abuser, Mel, until I was engaged to my wife. I never got to confront him. I never went to the police. He up and died on a boardwalk. I did not get justice.
You hit it on a second. I was going to say you hit on that, and the reality is, as much as justice in this life would have been good,
yeah,
you know, ultimately these people are going to face their justice
absolutely
later, and that's a reality and a fact that, you know, I don't know if that gives any kind of comfort to anyone, but there is one who
absolutely
settles all accounts.
That's exactly right. And knowing that, it's funny. People might think this is kind of a weird view, but that gives me incredible comfort. I mean, I'll tell you, I'm very much like Jesus. I wish that none would perish. I want to see people. I'm going to be totally honest with you. I'm not at a place yet where I'm praying for offenders. I pray a lot for all my kids, and I'm just going to tell you right now that I'm just not there yet. But at the same time, if there is redemption in their lives, because we're all dirty as all get out, then that's the supernatural aspect of who Christ is. And the reason I think I don't address that when I'm dealing with the kids and with those that have been offended against, because oftentimes they may not fully comprehend that in that moment. Right. So what I like to talk to them about is the fact that they were not intended for this. That this was not God's hope that they would walk through this. However, the promise is that God will walk with them through it. Mm-hmm. And I'm unapologetic in sharing with these kids that they're not a random act of the cosmos, that they were created intentionally. Sometimes I'll pre-flight it and tell them, hey, I don't intend to preach to you, but I want to make sure you understand that you are absolutely loved, that you are not an accident, and that there is unbelievable opportunity and hope for you. And that hope is only found from my own experience and from what I've studied, from the hope of Christ. And I feel like it's so funny. My wife said, do you see how God's redeemed your story? How you went from poverty, how you went from homelessness, how you went from a father who went to jail, a mom who struggled with drug addiction, to being abused. And now you have been given the authority to speak on these things. You're not just someone who doesn't have a lived experience. And so wow. I'm sitting there and my wife kicked me in the teeth with that. And I'm like, for years, I wondered why. And at 43 and a half years old, it took 43 and a half years for me to figure out why. How many other whys do I have that I may not know in this side of heaven? But now I have the opportunity to start the process of getting these kids to think about why. In fact, all three kids that participate in the documentary, I've let them know how, when that documentary has been shared, how they have impacted lives of people that they'll never know this side of eternity. Mm-hmm. And so that's part of the restoration process, is knowing that your story, I'm not going to call it your truth. It's the truth. There's only such thing called as the truth. How the truth of their experience is able just to absolutely impact kids. And so restoration is totally independent of whatever happens to the offender. And I feel like I have an obligation to let them know that restoration can only fully be experienced by knowing that there's a creator that knows your name, that is walking with you through the trauma, and that wants to see you whole. So
I think that's a good place to kind of land things. And I'm going to send it over to you, John, to wrap us up, brother.
Man, brother, I appreciate you, Jeff, for coming out and hanging out with us and talking with us. And it was a tough subject. It's a hard, like I said, a heavy
It's heavy.
subject to
Heavy.
walk through.
Yeah.
But we appreciate
Not
you.
a lot of joking going
Yeah,
on this
they
one,
try
fellas.
to do my best, but it's just too hard to swing. It's too hard to swing at those balls, man. It's too hard. And so man, we appreciate you coming here, Jeff, and hanging out with us, and man, we appreciate what you do for God's kingdom and for the kids. Man, we just want to thank you, and we're praying for you and your family and your ministry. And like I would say, your job is your ministry at that point, because I mean, you're doing kingdom building, on a level that not a lot of people get to do, and so we thank God for you. And I'm just ready for you to come back over here and hang out with me, man. So I know
I told you the next time I'm coming over, I'm bringing the family, man.
You got to, man.
I mean, I want my kids to come. I'm just going to say it out. I'll tell you flat out, you're a hero of mine. From the day that I met you guys, from the day I met you guys, man. And you ask my family, they know that there's going to come a point in time. I'm hoping it's sooner rather than later, where we're all going to come out there and we're going to be able to support you guys and see what you're doing and serve with you. And I want you guys to know I love what you're doing. This is super cool. And you need to know that it's an absolute privilege and very humbling to be invited to participate with this on this podcast with you guys. You guys are class acts, man.
Man,
you don't get out enough, man.
Yes.
I thought we weren't recording.
Oh yeah, no, we're recording.
I don't want anybody else to know that.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, literally, man, you're awesome, brother. We love you, man. Thanks for coming on and hanging out with us, brother. And if we can do anything for you, and if anybody that wants to see the video, where can they find the video at to go watch that?
So we're getting ready to put all those videos up to have them available publicly on unstrangerdanger.com.
Okay.
One of the unique things that's kind of come out of this whole deal is because ultimately I told my wife I would just love to be I want to work myself out of this job, my full-time gig, and I love to teach. I love to have opportunities to hopefully inspire and build people up and let them see the hope despite all this stuff. And so one day my hope is that I'll be able to go to, I don't know, various churches or schools or whatever and help educate people and share the documentary and share what's going on. But despite that, for no cost at all, we're going to put it up on the website in the next, hopefully in the next week or so, and you'll be able to sit and watch it we're trying to do 5 to 7 minute videos, trying to do one a month. Now that the pandemic is over, we'll be able to film some more. But yeah, you can go to unstrangerdanger.com and that's where it is. Okay. That's where it will land.
Well, thank you guys for hanging out with us. Jeff, you especially hanging out with us. I mean, it's been challenging, and man, it's probably the heaviest episode we've done, I feel like, but we definitely do appreciate you and what you do. And guys, we appreciate you listening. And if you have anything along these lines you need to talk about, reach out to us. God bless you guys. Peace.